Phone etiquette. Okay, so phone etiquette. So yeah, you're gonna use the phone a lot when you're an affordable housing property manager, managing an apartment complex, affordable housing property community. You're gonna be running the phone, answering the phone, making phone calls, dialing the phone, depending on the system they have. Some places they have the electronic phone, which means the phone is built into the computer. So their time of the hand phone, the time of the handheld phone is kind of going away. That time is kind of going away in the office. Now all the phones are built into the computer. You just have a headset and you call using the internet. There's many different uh, phone services that use internet. It's a good way to track. It's a good way to keep information, spread it across the company, create like a consolidated network, a phone network. Also track who's calling, who's receiving calls, what calls are being made. So it's definitely something I agree with. Communications is a very big part of your organization. Communication is very, very important. You have no communications and it can't work. But phone etiquette also goes further than that. There's some simple things that I will teach you. Like, for example, when you're working, in your office, you're working a management, a community apartment manager, and you have to make a phone call. Generally, I get to work really early. I'm at work at 7:30 in the morning. I'm up a lot sooner before that, but I have to be at work at 7:30, and I don't make phone calls until about 8:30 or 9. If it's very urgent, then maybe 8:30, but 9 o'clock is the sweet spot. Generally, because you don't want to call people too early. People are getting up, doing their thing as well. So ideally, you want to call people around like 9 o'clock. That's probably like the best time. So, and that's one of the things that guys into phone etiquette. And you make those are the calls you make, but also when you answer the phone, you want to also identify yourself. You can't just say like hello, because it's like an improper way of answering the phone. You want to give the proper greeting of the day. You want to report, where they're calling to. So, for example, I say thank you for calling whichever property I'm working at. This is your name. How can I help you? And what that does is it creates a sense of professionalism because you never know who's calling. I mean, if you have caller ID, you can tell who's calling. Maybe it's somebody, doesn't matter, but what if it's somebody in your organization, or what if somebody higher up and they get annoyed by the way you're answering, and then they can give you a hard time? Remember how I talked about that? They can give you a hard time. We're trying to avoid getting a hard time in this situation. So you want to give the proper greeting of the day. You want to answer the phone professionally, pretend like you don't know who's beyond the other end of that, so you want to make sure you're doing it right. The other thing I want to mention too is making phone calls. So when you make phone calls as well, a lot of people say leave messages. I try not to leave too many messages because it can kind of messed up. So I try to avoid it. I make the phone call and wait for people to call me back. But if you have to, you can leave a message. Like I said, try to be very professional in the message. Explain. You always want to explain, and you want to talk slowly, and you want to, when you're repeating phone numbers. So for example, you tell somebody, okay, this is my phone number, you can reach me at this number, and you tell them the number. Then you want to repeat that number because people hear the number and then they're going to need to hear it one more time. So you say, you can reach me at this number, this number, this number, this number, this number. Again, it's this number, this number, this number, this number. So you have it set up like that so that people can get a second chance to get your information. So that's how you give your number. You give your name too. You want to give the reason that you're calling. Some people, when they have phone etiquette, they want to also say like, "Hey, you can call me back at this time. Try to reach me between this time. I'll be available." And then so the person can see if they're able to call you at that time. Some people do it like that. In the training, they tell us to do it like that. So yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend it. Most of the time, people call back and then I just answer. But my situation's a little bit different. Try not to give your cell phone number out. You only want to give your cell phone number out if it's absolute emergency, and you never want to give it to a tenant. Never give your cell phone number to a tenant because they'll be calling or they'll pass the number around. But it depends on you too, because there was a time where, I mean, even currently right now, there's a few tenants who have my cell phone number, but that's because there were some emergencies that took place after hours. So but those things were handled, so it wasn't an issue for me. The problem is that some managers, they hand out their cell phone number to everybody, and then everybody's calling them, and then they do some favors for some people but not for others, And so it looks like a favoritism thing, or they're talking on the phone like they're friends with some residents, and it looks like a favoritism thing, and it shouldn't be like that. So the only reason you would give your cell phone number out is, like, for example, if it's after hours and there's like a flood and the plumber needs to reach you at 10 o'clock at night or something. You're not going to be in the office at 10 o'clock at night. You're going to be in your apartment. So that's the only reason you give out your cell phone number in those situations. And those are to vendors, those are not to residents. Okay. So unless maybe, if you're in communication with the resident while this is going on, then maybe there's a need to do that. But that's very, very emergency specific things, like flood, fires. Those are very emergencies where you had to do stuff like that. So, but I definitely highly recommend not giving out your cell phone number. I worked with this one person. She was a social worker, and she had given out her cell phone number to all the residents, and then they kept calling her, and she kept saying she was being bombarded with phone calls. When somebody tells you they're being bombarded with phone calls, to be honest with you, they might have another problem, because you need to also learn how to say no and how to create a barrier. So, for example, even after you've given out your cell phone, if the resident keeps calling you, you need to talk to the resident and tell them, hey, this is my cell phone. I gave you this number on that day for this specific reason, but that's it. You should no longer be calling me. If you have a reason, you have anything to call me about, you have to call the office, right? But some people, they don't have that. They don't have that ability to communicate properly. So that's why this lady had that problem a lot. But I don't think you'll have that problem. I think that if you're a good manager and you're paying attention to everything and you're on top of everything, then I don't think you'll have too much of a problem with residents bothering you after hours. But basically, that's phone etiquette. Be professional on the phone. You don't know who is on the other end. State your name, give the proper greeting. Oh, keep a phone log too. Every conversation you have, whether it's on the phone or in person, you should have a log. And all these logs go in your notebook, and you have a notebook, and you're building a profile on everybody. Okay, because you have to build a profile on everybody, because this is a very people business. You're managing people, you're working with people, and the thing about people is people live in big cycles. So the minute that you can identify those cycles, you'll have a stronger edge. So when you have these phone logs and these phone conversations, before you go and talk to this person again, you can check the phone log and you can see what the conversation was. You'll be better prepared, and you can actually see where there's a big circle, and if you're coming back and we're making circles again. So that's pretty much my take on the phone thing. I think pretty straightforward, but it does take some practice. Talking to people on the phone, sometimes it's kind of hard, but with some practice, you'll get it, considering that it's pretty much the same conversations over and over again.